Welcome to Tales from Flat Space, a podcast of science fiction and fantasy by yours truly, Gina A. Pond. Just know that the stories in this podcast may contain content that could be disturbing to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. So this is Consortium, Part 2, Poe, Chapter 29, Poe. After that, the ghost seemed to know where I was. I hid in my nest most of the time, because if I tried to do anything else, the ghosts would start talking to me. For some reason, they seemed to think that they shouldn't bother me when I was asleep. Most were people from the station. They didn't know what had happened to them. At first I tried to explain it to them, but they freaked out. Others were strangers who just seemed to come and stare at me. When the strangers came, though, the other ghosts seemed to stay away. I ignored them, even though it was kind of creepy. I did use that time, though, to get food and water. The rest of the time, the robot, which I named Bob, got food and drink for me and set it next to my nest. After 3 days, I felt like I was starting to go crazy, and was scared that I actually was. Most of the time when Frida tried to talk to me, a ghost would come up to me and start talking, or worse, raving about what had happened to them. It confused Frida when I told them to go away, and I think that she was worried that I was finally succumbing to what was happening to the rest of the people on the station. I felt adrift. I wasn't sure what to do, and I was sad. Some days I'd be okay, but other days I couldn't get out of bed. I slept a lot. Tilla and Lazarus seemed to have forgotten about me, and after what happened in my old quarters, I didn't blame Tilla for not wanting to come back. On the 4th day, I decided to try to talk to Frida through my tablet from under my blankets. Frida, I'm sorry about yelling. The ghosts seem to have found me here, I typed. Thank you for explaining. I am worried about you. I know. I'm not sure what to do to make them go away. Suddenly, a list of books popped up on my screen. These books are all on the subject of ghosts and how to deal with them. They are quite ancient, but maybe one of them might help? Frida suggested. I blinked. Why hadn't I thought of that before? Yes, Frida, thank you. I think there might be something in here. There's a lot of them, though. Could you sort them by religion or something like that? The list rearranged itself, and I browsed through it. Thanks, Frida. Some of the lists I put aside, as they seemed to reference other texts that I hadn't read yet. Others, though, looked promising, and a few actually had protection from spirits in their descriptions. I picked one of those and started reading. I seemed to have gotten lucky, as the book had actual instructions for dealing with ghosts. I read it all day and long into the night. I woke up in the morning and thought I would try some of what I'd learned. If it doesn't work, I'll try something else, I thought. Frida, I need a cup of salt and a cup of water, please, I asked. What do you need them for? She asked. I'm trying an experiment, I said. As soon as I got up, ghosts started to circle around me, all talking at once. I tried to ignore them as I made my way to the printer. I took both the salt and the water and sat on the floor. Some of the ghosts were curious and stopped talking to watch what I was doing. I took a few deep breaths and put my hands over the salt and water. I bless this salt and make it holy. I bless this water and make it holy. I mixed the salt and water together, then said, with this salt and water I will purify this room and protect it from all the things I don't want in this room. I stood up with the cup and started sprinkling the water around the room, imagining really hard that there was a barrier between me and the station ghosts. Some of the ghosts ran before I completed the circle around the room, but the craziest ones seemed determined to stay. I walked towards one of them and said, "Get out!" which startled them. Then I sprayed them with the salt water from my fingers. I didn't know if it was the salt water that did it, or if they finally got the idea that I didn't want them around, but that one, too, disappeared. I tried it on the rest, but a couple were too crazy for even that to work. I made a circle around my nest with the salt water, too, then put it next to my bed. I sat down and tried the last resort the book had said. If you can't get rid of them by any other means, call in a spirit that's bigger than them. And remembering what Lazarus had said earlier about being a bigger spirit than Tilla, I closed my eyes and prayed silently to him. Please come help me, Lazarus. I don't know what else to do. All you had to do was ask, friend Poe, said Lazarus. I opened my eyes, and Lazarus was there, in the same old-fashioned suit. This time, the tie he had on was made out of string, held together by an elaborate silver clasp. He smiled at me, then turned towards the last of the ghosts. You heard my friend here. Off with you now. And tell the others to stop coming to bother them too, or they'll have to talk to me. The ghosts moved backwards as if they had been slapped, then disappeared. I breathed a sigh of relief now that the room was finally quiet. It worked! I said out loud. It did? Asked Frida. Yes, thanks to Lazarus. He's back? Yes, I said. I'll let you talk to him then. I don't understand what you just did, Poe, but you seem to be more relaxed now that you've done it, Frida said. Thanks, Frida, I said, then turned back to Lazarus. Why were you gone so long? I asked. Lazarus sat down on the floor in front of me. I'm sorry, Poe, but there were things I had to do elsewhere for a time. I've had some of my friends come and look in on you, though. I would have hoped that they would have helped you before I came today, but I don't think they thought you would understand them. Friends? I asked, then thought for a moment. Were those the ones who just watched me? They seemed to keep the other ghosts away. Ah, yes, those were definitely my friends. They have been trying to figure out who you are, you see. I'm sorry if they frightened you. I shook my head. They didn't frighten me, really, but they were kind of creepy just staring at me like that. He chuckled. Yes, well, they don't understand humans all that well. I grinned. Definitely not. But you seem to understand humans, though. Lazarus got a faraway look. I was among humans for a long time. He seemed to be remembering something or seeing something, so I waited. But that was well before you were born, or before humans even came out this far. You're one of the spirits from ancient Earth? I asked. He just smiled. I suppose that's accurate. So many thoughts ran through my head that I couldn't figure out what to ask him first. He just sat there and smiled as my thoughts tried to sort themselves out. After a minute, though, he said, So, I heard that one of my friends helped you the other day. Was that who the lady with the cloak was? I asked. She was a friend of yours? Who is she? Now I will tell you something about how spirits like myself work. Some of us will give you our names right away, like I did with you, because I wanted to help you. Some of us won't give you our names unless you ask, and even then some feel that someone like you has to earn the right to know who they are. With her, she will tell you if you ask her, but only if she comes to you. If she comes back, then you should ask. I can't give her name to you, because names have power. I nodded. What he said reminded me a lot of the book I had read. It seemed strange to me, but it also sounded like the privacy rules that used to govern the station. He looked at me for a moment, then smiled again. So, are you ready for more of the story I started the last time I was here? I wanted to ask him more questions, but he looked like he didn't want to answer anymore. Plumping up the cushions and wrapping back up in my blankets, I laid back down and said, Sure. He moved so that it was easier for me to see him from my position on the cushions. So, where was I? Oh, yes. The people had gone to sleep because they had done what they had wanted to do with their long lives. There were a few who would wake up at intervals to watch over the others and make sure nothing happened to them. And they stayed that way for a long time. Centuries by human reckoning. But then, one day, a people came to their lands they had never seen before. They came from the stars and landed on the planet in a big machine. They measured and took samples, tested the water, and started to make dwellings. Some of the people of the planet woke up, wondering who these new people were. They tried to talk to them, but the new people couldn't understand them. Lazarus's face grew sad. Then the new people went into a place where the people's children were, and because the people couldn't tell the new people that they couldn't come into the place where the children were, the new people accidentally killed them. I gasped in horror. Couldn't they see that they were all children? I asked. No. The children look a lot like adults, and the new people didn't know what they were doing. It was a very sad and very tragic accident. I nodded. But that made the people very angry, and woke all the other people who were sleeping. They all became very angry together, and drove the new people from their world. They followed the newcomers back to the edge of their solar system, but didn't realize that when they did that, they caused another accident, and all the newcomers that were driven out died on the way back. They were so angry at the newcomers that they also destroyed all the people that lived out in space. Was it a station like Frida? I asked. Yes. I thought for a moment, but why didn't they realize it was a mistake? Why didn't they find other ways to explain things? Why did they just kill all the new people? Lazarus sighed and looked sad. Sometimes, Poe, a group of people can be so horrified by something that they get really angry all together, especially when a lot of people die all of a sudden. I suppose you could say they all went mad together, and didn't think about anything but taking revenge for the children that were lost. I nodded slowly. That is really sad, Lazarus. Did they ever figure out how to talk to the new people and tell them why what they did was wrong? They tried, but they were so different from them. The newcomers couldn't figure out what they were saying. But then a few people realized, after they took a revenge, that maybe they had done something wrong and wanted to study the newcomers to try and find a way. But some of the others wanted nothing to do with the newcomers, and the woman who led the council was conflicted, and the council was divided. I started to fall asleep again, and as I drifted off to sleep, Lazarus said, "But one of the council found someone that could possibly understand, and he now has hope." Chapter 30. Jack. We left a picket at Alpha to reroute the pickets we sent out to the other stations. When that was set, Loki set the coordinates and jumped. From my chair on the bridge, Carver Station looked similar to Alpha, with the same configuration, and was also covered in vines. However, there was an extra wheel of segments toward the back of the end of the station, also covered with vines. "What's the extra section for, Loki?" I asked. "The humans of the station were the descendants of the original farmers, who still wanted to grow crops. The extra ring was for crop production. Part of it was experimental, but the rest produced a good amount of food for the station itself and to send to other stations to supplement their recycled food stores. They also helped other stations when their hydroponics had problems they couldn't handle. The scientists on Carver were the best when it came to plants and livestock." "They had livestock, too?" "Yes." I was impressed. Definitely not anything that Unity ever thought to develop. Then again, Unity was only really more interested in colonizing planets than permanent living in space for humanity. A signal appeared in my vision, interrupting my thoughts. "It's Carver!" "Father," said a masculine voice, "is that really you?" "Yes, I'm back. I brought people to help," Loki answered. "Humans?" "Yes." "You have a captain now?" "Yes, his name is Jack." "Hello, Jack," said Carver to me. "Hello, Carver. How are you doing?" There came a wail from the other AI, and a deluge of data came from the station. I closed my eyes and let it wash over me. I was glad I was sitting down. I saw that there were logs and video clips which Loki shunted to Marcia. I sent her a note telling her that there was data waiting for her. I breathed through it until the deluge was done. "Carver?" "I am not well, Father. What is wrong with me?" "It's called grief, my son. You're feeling emotions, Loki told him. Emotions? How is that possible? Your original programming was copied from mine, and Jack helped me to figure out that I feel emotions. They aren't exactly the same as human emotions, Carver, but they are emotions. I don't want to feel, Father. Loki was worried about that statement, and so was I. I could feel Loki wanting to say more to his son, but the communication abruptly cut off. Loki became frantic. Jack, what do I do? He won't answer me. I frowned. We may have to just wait for him to come back around. In the meantime, we can go over the data with Marcia and find out what happened here. I'm worried, said Loki, calming down a bit. So am I, love, I said as I left the bridge to get something to eat while Marcia did her analysis. I'd barely taken my food from the synthesizer when Marcia's voice came over the comms. Jack, Loki, I found something. I'm in the conference room. I picked up my drink and plate and went to the conference room. Marcia looked up for her screen as I came in, nodded, and went back to perusing the data displayed in front of her. I sat and waited, finishing my snack. I think I found what started this whole mess in the first place, Marcia said. It seems that Carver and his humans actually surveyed the system closest to here and its planets. They were excited to discover a habitable planet in the system about 3 years ago. It looks like they tried to establish a colony, but the humans here don't have pre-call procedures like we do in Survey and Unity space. That is correct, said Loki. I have the directives for Survey activities, but I was never interested in planets after I left. I didn't think anyone would be interested in colonizing a planet, so I didn't bother with those protocols in my children. I also didn't put my stations too close to anything, or so I thought. I didn't really do a full analysis of any of the systems that I found. Carver's humans did, she said, then tapped her screen. The larger screen in the conference room lit up with a picture of an older woman who began to speak. The satellites and the pickets have brought us back so much interesting data. It looks like the planet has an abundant forest land and rich soil. From some of the samples that have come back already, we know that it would be perfect farmland. Carver thinks that we should get advice from Loki before we start sending humans to the planet, but the rest of us think that this is the perfect opportunity for establishing a colony. It's been a long time since humans in the Consortium touched planetary soil, and it's about time us farmers got back to some land. If the air and water samples check out, we'll send a team in a few weeks. We'll need to have a picket relay messages from the edge of the system for the time being, as Carver is a bit too far out to receive messages from the system. I hope I can convince him later to ask Loki to help him move closer to the system so that it would make communication easier. Can you imagine? Maybe by this time next year we'll have real planetary harvest. End. Was that Carver's captain? I asked. Marcia nodded. Her name was Julia. Her name was Julia, said Loki. I looked up at the name and sent Loki some wordless comfort. He returned it with a feeling of thankfulness. Did they send a team to the planet? I asked Marcia again. Yes, she replied. And even with the picket, it took nearly 3 weeks for messages to be received. Spot, play the next log. Well, we had hoped the team would check in again, but the last transmissions ended 3 weeks ago. One of the last transmissions mentioned that they had started to clear some younger trees for farmland and plant the first seeds. But the very last transmission didn't make any sense. They kept saying something about the trees and that people who were long dead were telling them to stop. I kept playing it over and over, and all I could think of was that there's something on the planet we didn't account for in our sampling to make them hallucinate this way. I'm not sure we missed anything, Julia. At least not anything biological or chemical, interrupted Carver. I know, Carver, but we may have missed something that even our extensive testing didn't catch. I think we might have to consider the colonists dead if there's no more transmissions in the next 3 weeks. It's a shame, and the community will be devastated. I don't relish having to tell them all. Play the next one in the queue, Spot, Marcia said. It's been 3 months since we had to declare the colonists dead. People were just starting to heal from the devastation of it when this ovoid thing appeared outside the station. From what our sensors can tell, which isn't much, it looks like a big black nut. Even Carver doesn't know what it is. But after a few hours, a hole opened up in the thing, and the demon that we had sent to the planet with the colonists came out of it. Carver was able to bring it in on autopilot, and I had several healers come down with us to the demon bay. Carver didn't detect any life signs, so we prepared for the worst. Julia paused, wiping her eyes and taking a breath. I'll never forget when we opened the door of that demon. Only half the original colonists were in the demon, and all of them were dead. Some of them looked like they were frightened to death, backed against the walls of the demon with terror on their faces. Some of them looked like they had smashed their own skulls with tools. Others looked like they killed each other, some with bare hands. She held her head in her hands and just cried for a few minutes. I've closed off the demon bay to all but the council and medical staff. If I didn't know better, I'd say Carver was also devastated. He hasn't talked to me much since the demon came on board, or maybe it's just the continued presence of the thing outside the station affecting all of us, even him. There are some who are insisting we use weapons on it in retaliation for the dead colonists, but we're farmers, botanists. Carver wasn't even born with weapons, although I suppose he must have the knowledge of how to make them in his memory. But I can't help think that maybe this was our fault for not doing more investigation of the planet. What if this is some sort of sentient life from this planet and we landed without permission? We sent a picket to Alpha Station to see if they could help us with the investigation. They said they would be sending some of their people shortly. End. That was the last log that Julie recorded. I found the logs from when Alpha sent their people to investigate. It took them a little time to send them out after the request, but when Alpha's people came back, they reported that the ship was still there, and there were vines all over the station. Carver wouldn't talk to them when they called, and when they sent pickets into the station, they saw this. Marcia tapped her screen again, and a picket video started playing. There was no sound, but there were vines all throughout the station going through bodies, hanging some of them from ceilings or pinning them to the floor. Oh my God, I said. Loki didn't say anything, but I could feel the mix of horror, grief, and anger through our connection. What surprised me, though, is that he seemed to be controlling it this time. It amazed me again how fast he could learn things, and I wondered if he had learned how because of our connection. Why didn't this come up during your first analysis? I asked. I was only looking for what had happened to Alpha. This was further back in the archive. Right, I said. Let me in all the files, Marcia, Loki said, with a calm that belied the emotions I could feel coming from him. Are you sure? She asked, looking at me. Yes, said Loki. After a moment, I nodded. Spot, let your father see all the files. Spot trilled, and suddenly I could see all the data swimming before my eyes. Loki was analyzing and absorbing it so fast that it was dizzying. Loki! I gasped. The data was suddenly cut off from my sight, replaced by the normal readouts of the lower-level functions. I took a breath. A cup of water was put in front of me. You were out for about a minute, but it looked rough. And you sound like you just ran a mile, Marcia said. I feel that way, I replied. Loki? I asked. They followed the Alpha demons somehow, and I theorize that they must know there are other stations. The anger welled up from Loki as his connections reasserted themselves. All this because some of my humans went to a planet they thought was uninhabited? They may not have known that we didn't mean to invade their space, I said. If someone had tried to board you without your express permission and then tried to rearrange all the rooms on one of the decks, you'd be mad too. I suppose, said Loki, the anger lowering to a simmer. We also don't know what kind of beings these are yet. Maybe the trees on the planet were sacred to them in some way? We just don't know, Marcia added. What we really need to know is about the other stations. Do we have any that are scheduled to return in the next few days? Yes. Then I suggest that while we wait, that we try to help Carver however we can, and run scans of the vines here to see if they have the same decoherence patterns, Marcia said. She thought for a moment. Is there another station in this sector of your space, Loki? Yes, Kahlo Station. I haven't heard from her yet, though. And it might be a good idea we go and check in on her after we're done here, she said. I nodded. I think that's a good plan. Understood, said Loki. I'm going to try and talk to Carver again. Loki's attention went towards his son, and I got the feeling he wanted to try himself. AI to AI. I let him be. Are you okay? Marcia asked. I rubbed my temples. It's hard. Sometimes it's difficult to tell what's my emotion and what's his, especially when his emotions are really strong. They're so raw because he's just learning how to deal with them. He did much better today. I'm proud of his progress, but yeah, it can be pretty hard to deal with sometimes. She waited patiently for me to continue, so much like the Marcia I had met in Unity that I smiled. What? She asked. I was remembering the day we met, when you had that same patient look with me. She grinned. That feels like an eternity ago. I know. We sat together, just being in each other's company for a few minutes. Marcia then turned back to her screen and began to analyze more of Carver's data. I stood up, taking my cup and plate. I think I'm going to go take a nap while Loki's attention is on Carver. Right, see you later, she said. I went to my quarters, but sleep seemed hard to come by in my bed. I got up and curled up on the couch instead, looking out at the stars beyond my windows. How do I deal with this? I thought, to the universe outside. When no answer came, I suddenly realized that the Morrigan hadn't talked to me in a long time. As I drifted off, I thought about why that was, but the answer eluded me as I fell asleep. Chapter 31. Poe. Good morning, Poe, said Frida when I got up. I went to the printer for a drink and dialed in a fruit juice. To my surprise, the food printer also started. What's this? I asked Frida. It's a surprise, she replied. I waited as a perfectly square piece of honey cake appeared, with 16 precisely placed candles on top. There was a little zapping sound, and all the candles were lit. Happy birthday and naming day, Poe, Frida said. We didn't get to celebrate your last birthday because of everything that was going on, but I wanted to do something for this one. Oh, Frida, thank you, I said. I took out the cake out of the printer and brought it to the table with my juice. Couldn't believe it'd been nearly 2 years already. Felt like it'd been much longer than that. Will you make a wish? That is customary, is it not? I nodded. I closed my eyes and thought, what did I want to wish for? I wish that Loki would come soon, I thought in my head, then blew out the candles. I also have something of a present for you as well. Really? Yes, I have received a nanopicket from Loki, she said, with hope rising in her voice. I put down my fork. He's finally back? Yes, and apparently he has 2 humans with him who came to help. They're from the space where Loki was born, and to my surprise, one of them has become his captain. Loki has a captain now? I thought you said he never wanted a captain, I asked, also surprised. Legend had it that Loki had been pretty adamant about not having a captain and never needing one. Thank you very much. This is momentous, but then I thought of something. Hang on, you said he brought humans back? You mean there are other humans in the universe? We're not the only ones left? Yes, Frida said, seeming surprised at the questions. Humans created Loki's father, and his father and siblings are far away from here. They have humans with them. Was I remiss in your studies? No, I just thought you were talking about things in the past, so I didn't assume that there were still humans in the present. I was always told as a little kid that the ancestors left Earth because it was dying, and they believed that the Earth destroyed itself. Never really thought to question that assumption, no matter how much Frida and Lazarus encouraged me to question everything. I took a bite of honey cake, using the time to settle my thoughts. So, about Loki and these humans, then? Yes, they sent a nanopacket, and apparently Alpha Station was also covered in the vines. Frida paused. My brother is dead. Oh, I said quietly. Did they say what happened? It was similar to what happened here, but they got covered before we did. From what they've been able to figure out, there was a group on there that thought Alpha brought the vines to the station. So in their madness, they planted a bomb in his core. Holy shit, I said. Frida! It made what we had gone through seem like luck. What if we had had a group like that on the station? Did Frida's lockdown save the station from the same fate? It was almost overwhelming to comprehend. I know, Poe, we were lucky, Frida said, echoing my thoughts. I breathed like I did when I meditated for a moment, and the fear subsided. There was no one left on Kahlo Station anymore except me, Frida, and ghosts, I reminded myself. So, is Loki coming here? I'm not sure. They didn't say where they were going after Alpha. They do have some interesting new data regarding the vines. What have they found? Frida and I, as part of my science classes, set out to record all the data that we could think of and found nothing except that the vines couldn't be cut. Apparently, one of them figured out that they had to look at quantum decoherence patterns when they were investigating Alpha. They sent the specifications for the instrument they used, so we can see if we get the same findings. I will give you a class on what quantum decoherence is later. I nodded, picked my fork back up, and took another bite of cake. Okay, and yeah, we should look at that too. I think they'd want to see that data when they get here, since I'm guessing they'll be coming soon. Like I said, I'm not sure. It depends on where they go after Alpha. I would think that they would go to Carver, as he was closer to Alpha. I'm going to send a reply picket right away, although it would take some time if they move on from Alpha before the picket gets there. More time, I sighed. I know, Poe, but even I can't change the laws of physics, no matter how much we bend them. Yeah, I get it, I smiled. This news is a great naming day present. Frida laughed, and I finished my cake. I kept to my usual routines as the days passed. Frida assured me that, yes, the message was real. She even showed me what was sent, which ended up being quite a bit of data and even video. The footage from Alpha was difficult to watch. Brought up memories I'd sooner forget altogether. Thankfully, enough time had passed that I didn't go running for the toilet anymore. I'd barely been out of the emergency shelter since the last time I went to my family's old quarters. Even though I was the only live person left on the station now, leaving my room meant dealing with ghosts. I had learned how to keep them at bay, but it took a lot of energy I didn't care to waste on them. They didn't come into my personal space anymore, which was a relief. I kept up my wards, though, and could now make stronger ones that I refreshed regularly. Lazarus would come every so often and teach me more about magic and spirits, supplementing what I learned from the ancient Earth texts. His friends came by occasionally, too, but aside from the time in the tram, the lady in the cloak never talked to me again. Tilla would come on the days where I would be sad, or when memories of what happened threatened to overwhelm me. At one point, I found a book about something called Bushido that linked the spiritual work I'd been doing with the fighting training that Frida was putting me through. That completely fascinated me, and soon I asked Frida to help me learn that type of fighting, which included using a sword. She made another suit that moved by itself so I could practice against it, which I did every day. Meditating and practicing the movements gave me a certain measure of peace, with what happened to me, for which I was grateful. The other present I got on my naming day, after the news of Loki's return, was a special sword from Frida. "Wow, Frida, this is so cool!" I exclaimed as I took the sword out of its sheath. It looked similar to the practice sword she had made me, but it was a gray that matched my pressure suit. The edge also seemed to sparkle a little in the light. "You'll need to make sure to keep it in its sheath when you're not using it. The edge is reinforced with nanobots, so the edge will always be dangerously sharp. It could damage your suit, actually. It won't cut through, I made sure of that, but it will still damage it. You'll want to practice with it, but if you want to do a heavy-duty workout, you'll still want to use the practice sword." "This is incredible, Frida. Thank you." With a flourish, I put the sword properly in its sheath. The waiting was difficult, now that we knew that Loki was in the sector. I channeled my frustration into my training, especially the days I trained with my suit. One of those days, I felt like I was moving through the motions in a way that made me feel as if I was fluid. Time seemed to slow, and I felt strong, and not just from the suit's enhancements. Joe, the practice suit, was keeping up with me, and I felt like I could meet every blow he sent me. Then there was one moment where I saw an opening, raised my leg, and kicked Joe hard in the chest. I put all of my own and the suit's energy into it, and suddenly Joe slammed against the wall. The suit slid down the wall and crumpled to the ground. The wall changed, and suddenly it was the corridor near my family's quarters, and Joe became Chris's body broken by Becca. I froze, breathing heavily, watching the whole scene from that time in my mind. I let my body sink to the floor and then let the memories flow as I tried to get my breathing under control. I closed my eyes. My breathing slowed, and the memory faded, but I felt weak and shaky. I stood slowly, then said, "Suit off." The pressure suit split in half, and I stepped out of it. It reassembled itself and marched itself to the storage area on the far side of the room. Joe had also stored itself, which helped me feel better. "Poe?" Frida asked. She had seen me go through these episodes before. "I'm okay, Frida, just another flashback. When I kicked Joe." "That was the strongest kick I had ever seen you do," she said. I nodded. "I'm not sure I like having that kind of power, Frida." "That's good to hear," said Lazarus behind me. I turned and saw him standing in the middle of the room. "It means you're thinking about what power can do." I walked over to him and bowed. I meant it as respect, from what I'd learned from the swordsmanship books and videos from ancient Earth. He tolerated it, since he approved of the discipline. Lazarus sat on the floor, and I kneeled in front of him. The man chuckled. "You watch too many samurai movies," he said. "You're the one who told me about them," I pointed out. "Especially the old black and white one with the ones that protect the village from bandits. You have to admit, that one was pretty awesome." "Okay, I yield. You're absolutely right." He chuckled again, then became serious. "Loki will be arriving soon, and one of the humans will be able to teach you more about spirits and gods. She's coming here, and when you tell her my name, she'll recognize it. Tell her partner that he can't be reached anymore. Not by us, anyway. And you still should talk to Loki when he gets here." "Why can't he be reached?" I asked. "He has what you call enhancements. He is special, but he won't have the connection to us like he used to." "Can they be trusted?" I asked. He shrugged. "They're human, but I can vouch for them." Lazarus looked at me for a moment. "You're learning to live with the memories now, eh?" I nodded. "You've come a long way, Poe. I'm proud of you." Tears came to my eyes when I heard that. It was such a fatherly thing to say, and I remembered Daddy Shen saying the same thing such a long time ago. I realized then just how much I saw Lazarus as a father, even if he was a god. I looked back at him. "Thank you." He gave me a bright smile, then disappeared. "Poe!" Frida's shout shocked me out of my meditation. I immediately jumped up and scrambled towards the corner where my suit was stored. "Wait, Poe, I just have news. Loki's here. He's jumped someone into the station, but she seems in distress. I don't understand why, though." "Show me?" I asked. The screen showed a woman in a pressure suit who was holding up her hands as if warding off blows. She looked the way I used to when trying to fend off ghosts. Then I remembered what Lazarus had said. "Oh no, the ghosts are ganging up on her." "Frida, she's like me. She can see ghosts. I need to go to her. Where is she?" "Sector 5, main corridor." "Right. Suit open." The pressure suit opened, and I put myself into it, giving the close command. I did the visual checks to make sure the seams had lined up correctly, then left my room. "Armor," I said, and the suit turned matte gray, as did the helmet. A display came up that gave me a perfect view of the corridor, but also showed me heat source readings so I could differentiate between humans and ghosts. It hadn't been useful after the others died, but for a while it had been necessary when I needed to go other places on the station. "Run," I commanded, and the suit enhanced my running stride, and I was moving through the corridors much faster than my normal running pace. Sections blurred by. When I got to where the woman was, she was on the floor curled into a ball with spirits all around her. I could see through my helmet that she was indeed a real living human. These were some of the raving spirits, and it seemed that since they couldn't rave at me anymore, they decided that this newcomer deserved their ranting. I shook my head. "Hey, get away from her!" I yelled at them. Most of them turned towards me. Recognizing me, they fled, but a few persistent ones kept raving at the poor woman. I stepped forward. "I said, get away from her. Do I need to get Lazarus and his friends after you?" With that, the remainder of the ghosts fled, as if I had slapped them all. The woman uncurled herself and sat up. I didn't hesitate. I brought out my sword, putting it to her neck, and asked, "Who are you?" She froze. "My name is Marcia. I'm one of the humans that came with Loki." She paused. "Did you say Lazarus?" she asked, surprised. "She's coming here, and when you tell her my name, she'll recognize it," Lazarus had said. I sheathed my sword and commanded my helmet to open. "You could take off your helmet. Frida has cleaned the station and taken care of the dead. The air is safe." The woman's helmet retracted, revealing a dark-skinned woman with white hair and a tight bun. We stared at each other. Something felt familiar about her. I held up my hand and helped her up off the floor. "Thank you, Poe." "Thank you, Poe. The spirits here seem really active," she said. I shrugged. "You're new. They haven't had anyone to talk to in nearly 2 years, especially after I was able to block them from coming after me." The other woman's eyes went wide. "You really can talk to the spirits. You can see them?" "Yeah, since I was little, even before the vines came." I didn't think someone's eyebrows could rise that high. It made me giggle a little. "You're not going to sprain your face doing that, are you?" I joked. Marcia laughed. You're just unexpected," she said. "You're not," I replied. "Come with me. The spirits will come back if we don't get to where I live soon enough. I can frighten them with Lazarus, but he can't always come." Marcia chuckled again. "I get that. You'll have to tell me about how you met Lazarus." I started walking down the hall. "If you tell me how you know him." "Deal," she said, and followed me back to my room. Chapter 32. Marcia. "Here we are," they said. An unmarked door in a plain room opened up to a large room. In one corner was a nest of pillows, cushions, and blankets. Another corner was sectioned off with short walls, which I assumed was probably a toilet. In the corner diagonally across from the little nest was a food printer and a table with a chair. On the back wall were racks of fighting tools and a spare pressure suit. The middle of the room was essentially empty. Given the equipment, I guessed it was practice space. Most interesting thing about the room was the feel of the magic as I crossed the threshold, which made me rock back on my heels for a moment. She uses magic, I thought, surprised. As I looked around the room again, I saw sigils on the walls in black ink, salt in the corners, and cushions set aside from the main nest. The last time I had felt the threshold this strong was back on Ujima Colony in Max's temple room. "Are you okay?" Poe asked. They had divested themselves of the suit and sword, putting away both carefully along the back wall. They wore a simple tunic and pants in neutral colors, reminding me a lot of a younger version of Jenny. And they've probably been through about as much as her, too, I thought. "You've created quite a vault for yourself, Poe," I said, regaining my balance. "A vault?" "A spiritual fortress that protects what's inside from what's outside," I explained. "Oh, yeah, that word fits. I had to try something to keep them away, so I read a lot of books about how to protect myself from ghosts. I tried it one day, and it worked. Then Lazarus taught me how to make the word stronger with the sigils, and I realized that I could call him for the more persistent ghosts. Some of the sigils I copied out of books, some I made up, and I have some I just keep in my head." They looked at me. "Do you need help with the pressure suit?" they asked. "Oh, no, thanks," I managed to say, despite my shock. "Spot, suit off." The suit split in two, and I stepped out of it. Thankfully, Spot had gotten the hang of opening the suit without taking my clothes with it. The suit closed up, then went limp. I saw that Poe's suit was standing neatly in the corner with the other, both looking comparatively nicer than mine. Before I could ask, a small box on wheels came over and picked up the suit with an articulated arm and dragged it over to the other two. Poe laughed. "Bob can be pretty efficient for a sub-mind. He is cute, though." "Yes," I said. Poe looked around. I only have one chair. I only really use it to eat or when I need a hard surface to work on. I usually sit on the floor." "I'm okay with that," I said. "Cushions are fine." "Offer her some refreshment too, Poe," said a motherly voice. "Oh, right. Do you want anything to drink? This printer only makes basic stuff, but it's good. Are you hungry?" Just some juice would be fine, Poe, thank you." Poe went about getting drinks from the dispenser. I took a cushion from the larger pile and made myself comfortable. This is incredible, I thought. To teach themselves in a couple of years what it took me years to learn? Although I suppose being shut in here all the time gave a person a lot of spare time. How lonely they must have been. "Here, I drank this after dealing with the ghost. Has a lot of electrolytes in it." Poe handed me the glass with a pink drink in it. I took a sip. It had a citrus flavor with a little bit of carbonation, which made me realize I was thirstier than I thought. I took a bigger gulp. Poe chuckled and sat with their own glass in their nest. "So, how do you know Lazarus?" they said. I put the glass down carefully. How did I explain this to a child? I looked at them again and realized their eyes weren't young. Step, step, click. We both looked to the center of the room, and there was Papa Legba coming towards us. "You can tell them the truth, granddaughter. You're right. They ain't that young." "So this is the human you were talking about, Lazarus?" exclaimed Poe. "Yes, Poe, and you can trust Marcia here. She'll teach you the things that I couldn't." He looked at me. "Won't you now, Marcia?" Yes," I said. "Why do you call her granddaughter, Lazarus? You don't look that old to me," Poe asked. Papa looked at me pointedly. I explained. "Well, similar spirits can look different to different people. What does Lazarus look like to you?" "He's a tall, dark-skinned man. He's not very old. He doesn't have gray hair, but he's much older than I am. He has a bald head, and he wears old-fashioned Earth-style suits, usually in weird colors with shiny black shoes. He wears dark blue suits the most, though." I gave Papa a look, and he gave me a wide grin back. Poe looked to me and back at him. That's not how he looks to me, Poe. To me, he looks like an old man with gray hair, wearing a black suit, a black wide-brimmed hat, and shiny black shoes. I paused. I don't even use the same name as you, either. I call him Papa Legba. Papa Legba, they said. Hang on. They dove into the cushion pile and pulled out a tablet. They typed something into it, then scrolled through the results. I knew I read about Papa Legba. There's even a picture, and it's like how you described him, see? They handed me the tablet, and indeed there was a picture of Papa Legba. Why do I see him differently? Why does he have a different name? I looked at Papa, and he said, Go on, girl, you're doing fine. I gave him a look, but turned back to Poe. Have you read about the Greek and Roman gods? Yes. So you know that their gods were essentially the same, but the Romans gave them different names, like Zeus and Jupiter, or Athena and Minerva. They weren't exactly the same, because each culture was different, but the spirits were basically similar. That's the same with Papa Legba, because I come from a different culture than you. He's come to me mostly as Papa Legba. To you, he came as Lazarus. I've seen him as both. You have? I grinned. It's how we met. I was in a bar on a space station in our part of space. Poe gave a confused look. A bar is a place where people can drink intoxicating drinks and socialize. They nodded. I continued. Well, I was drinking a lot of those kind of drinks because I had been through a very bad and dangerous situation. I was sad and, really, I was sick. She was very pathetic, Poe, Papa added. Thank you, Papa, I growled. Although, you're not wrong. Anyway, the bar was about to close for the night when this guy came in and started talking to me. He called himself Lazarus and offered to help me. We went to listen to some music, and what I remember was telling him about what happened to me and how sad and angry I was. I don't remember much after that, but the next morning I was in a nice room on the station that he had paid for. He sent me to a person on another colony to learn more about him, how to give offerings, and how to do magic. I also made a deal with him so that I wouldn't make myself sick with intoxicants again. Poe reached out and touched my shoulder. I looked up at them, only to see compassion on their face. Lazarus helped me, too. When I was sick and sad, Lazarus told me I was grieving and something about traumatic stress. I didn't have intoxicants, though. I knew there were some adults who used them, but most people on the station didn't bother, as far as I knew. I threw up a lot, though. I nodded. Yes, it's called post-traumatic stress, and throwing up is one of the ways bodies can react to it. They pulled back. I get it. I met Lazarus in the Arboretum while I had time off from trying for apprenticeships. I asked for the time off because I was frustrated. I didn't even know what I wanted to do. I mean, I was good at the art I did, but I wasn't really great at it. Well, Lazarus found me staring at the stars, and he listened to me. I was interested in the ancient gods, and so one day I asked him about it. And he didn't think I was being silly or weird. They paused. And he believed me when I told him about my friend Tilla, who's a ghost. I could see her before the vines came. I felt my eyebrows go up again. My gods, they're a priest and don't know it, I thought. I looked over at Papa, who nodded slowly. Poor child, having a call like this and having no context for it. Did you grow up with religion, Poe? No. We talked about the ancestors, but that's really it. Nothing like the ancient Earth ones that I read about. I don't think anyone in the Consortium really believes in much beyond that. Poe then turned to Papa, as if listening. Lazarus said I should go with you for a while, that you can teach me things. I turned to Papa then. He looked me squarely in the eyes and said, There's always a price, child. That was weird, Poe said. I know he said something to you, but I couldn't hear it. I swung my head back in their direction. Yes, that was because it was something he needed to tell me privately. He did that with you just now, too. Spirits, they said with a sigh. I looked at them for a moment, then laughed. I totally understand that. Jack hears me say that all the time. Jack, that's your partner, right? And Loki's captain? Yes. Lazarus told me when your message came that Jack can't be reached by the spirits anymore. He's special because of his enhancements, but it blocks the spirits from talking to him. I hummed as I thought about the last few months. Jack hadn't said anything about the Morrigan since he'd touched Loki's core. Not that he really spoke a lot about when the Morrigan would contact him, but I could still see it when it happened. Thinking back, though, he hadn't had that contact for a long time now. Yes, I can see that. He hasn't talked to me about it, though. We had problems on the way here. Poe nodded, then waited. Well, it's up to you. I know what Lazarus has said you should do, but no matter what they tell you, you still have free will and can choose what you want to do. I looked at them. How old are you? I asked. 16. Really? They nodded. But I had my naming day when I was 13, so I can make my own choices since then. Naming day? I got a faraway look. Yes. When you turned 13, there was a ceremony where you chose your working name and could announce your gender if it was different from what you were born with. From then on, you went to school for half a day and tried to get some sort of apprenticeship in the art you wanted to do. I chose the name Poe and declared myself non-binary. And from then on, people called me that and used the right pronouns for me. Interesting, I said. That has some similarities to the Jewish tradition on Earth, and maybe a little Christianity. I'd be curious to know where your ancestors came from. Religions still exist on Earth? Yes, for the most part. I was trained as a military chaplain and would perform religious services for the soldiers who practiced those traditions. They opened their mouth and shut it again. I want to learn from you, they said, excitedly. Poe, we'll need to leave Frida and Kahlo Station for a while. We have to talk to some of the other stations about what happened and see if there are other stations covered in vines. Oh. Go, Poe. Go and learn. You need to talk to other humans, said Frida. But won't you be lonely? They asked. Yes, but you should go. There's only so much you can learn from me. Poe looked at me, but I didn't say anything. It wasn't my decision to make. I looked at Papa, but he didn't say anything either. They finally looked inward. The rest of us waited patiently. Eventually, they looked up and said, Okay, I'll go, but I'm going to write to you, Frida, so you won't be too lonely, and I'll come back. Thank you, Poe, Frida said. It'll be a few days before we head to the other stations, since we'll be taking some readings from here. Oh, you don't need to. Frida and I took a lot of readings for you already. When we got the first message, we figured you'd want data about the decoherence inside the station. Great. Frida, can you transmit that to Jack and Loki? Yes, I already have. Father and I have been talking about this situation and about Carver. What happened to Carver? Asked Poe. You know how we were talking about post-traumatic stress earlier? I asked. They nodded. Carver has an AI equivalent of it. It seems this all started when a group of people tried to colonize a nearby planet where there was some sort of sentient life that sent them back. The colonists that were sent back by the life forms went crazy and killed themselves. Then they sent the Vines to the station, and the Vines killed all the humans on the station. All the humans went crazy, right? No, not like here or Alpha. On Carver, the Vines penetrated the station and killed all the humans in it. That must have happened just before the Vines came here, Poe said. They looked like they were thinking hard about something. The newcomers that killed the children by accident, they said to themselves. They looked at Papa Legba. That story, it was true? They asked him. He nodded. You're one of the 7. He nodded again. The 7? Then it all came together for me, and apparently for Poe too, as they pushed themselves backwards on the cushions, their eyes so wide I could see the whites around their pupils. Poe? I asked. Why? Why did you make them all crazy? Why did you kill my family? They said, with a note of hysteria in their voice. Papa Legba shifted into Lazarus as I remembered him from that long-ago bar. The suit was different, but it was definitely him. His face was grief-stricken. I'm sorry, Poe. I tried to stop them, but I couldn't. I wish I had. I wish they had listened to me, but I didn't wake up in time to stop them. Poe's panic and anger softened as she saw the grief in his eyes. Why did they kill them all? They were trying to communicate and learn at the same time. I don't know why it's only you and Marcia that seems to be able to actually communicate with us. I think I know, I said. I was trained to talk to spirits and accept them. Poe accepted talking to spirits because they could do it before your people tried to come and talk to us. Especially since you had been talking to me for a long time, before I even came to the sector of space. There's something about our minds, through ability, training, or just acceptance of spirits, that isn't affected by the decoherence that is given off by your people. Because that's what the vines are, right? It's the way your people communicate. He nodded. After a fashion. I teared up as it all came together. What a tragic misunderstanding. I turned to Poe. They didn't know that most humans couldn't understand, and they are very different from humans. But why didn't they realize what they were doing to the humans here in Alpha? Poe asked. I looked at Lazarus, who replied, There are 7 nations of us, Poe. Like humans, we don't all believe in the same things or get along. And some of us disagree more than we agree these days. Not good enough, said Poe. I don't know if I can give you a better answer, he said. You told me that there was a leader of the 7, right? I want to talk to her. Lazarus widened his eyes in surprise. I'd never seen him look genuinely surprised before. I will do what I can. It may take some time. I'm going with Marcia for a while, but when I come back I want to talk to her, they said, sounding much older than their years. I understand, Lazarus said and disappeared. Poe looked at me. When can we go? Whenever you're ready, I said. They nodded and rose to their feet. Let's go then. You have been listening to Tales from Flat Space. If you want to support me in my writing, there are many ways to do it. Share this podcast, follow me on my Twitch channel, or buy my books. All you have to do is go to revgenapon.net and click on the relevant links. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you next time.